What really stood out to me was how Sarah spoke about creativity, not as something separate from healing, but actually as a part of who we are. She talked about art, storytelling, acting, movement, and expression as all are ways that the life force moves through us.
And she made like such a powerful point that we are all creative beings. Even if someone doesn't identify as an artist, creativity can show up in how we move, how we speak, how we parent, how we arrange our homes, and how we respond to life. And then when we look at the next episode, that was such a different conversation with Julie and Tim. Yet the theme of curiosity carried through again.
It really did. Both Julie and Tim spoke so much about curiosity as a doorway. Julie described how curiosity had led her from human design and astrology and the matrix, energetics, coaching, alchemy. I mean, goodness, there was quite a list.
Yeah.
The quantum healing and star magic, and then also the breath work.
And then we had episode 342, and that brought us to a tender and personal conversation about dreams of inclusion and exclusion.
Yeah, that episode felt very close to my heart because belonging wounds are so deeply human. And many of us know what it feels like to feel left out or unseen, forgotten, or just feeling uncertain of our place in the world. Welcome back to the Healing You Method podcast. I'm Gloria Lybecker, and I'm here with my very dear friend and co-host, Gail Donohue.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad you're here with us today. This is one of our recap conversations where Gloria and I take time to pause, reflect, and integrate the deeper threads from the last 3 episodes.
Yes, and I always love these conversations because they give us a chance to really listen beneath the surface. Each episode always has its own very unique message, its own guest, and its own focus. But when we step back, we can often begin to see a larger pattern that's emerging.
Yeah, and Gloria, that feels especially true with these last 3 episodes we're reflecting on today. Um, they may sound quite different at first, but creativity and embodiment and quantum alchemy and multidimensional healing, and then dream work around inclusion and exclusion. But there's such a beautiful thread connecting all of them.
There really is. Together, these conversations invite us to ask, what does it mean to reclaim the parts of ourselves we've hidden, we've forgotten, or disconnected from? And what does it mean to really listen to the body, to the soul, or to the field, and to the symbolic language of our dreams?
Yeah, and maybe also, what does it mean to become more fully ourselves? Not as a performance, not as a way to earn belonging, but as a return to our own truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So today we'll be reflecting on episode 340, which is You Are the Dreamer, Reclaiming Your Creative Power Through the Body with Sarah Demistier, where we explored creativity, embodiment, storytelling, and becoming the conscious creator of your life.
And then we'll reflect on episode 341, Quantum Alchemy, Galactic Awakening, and the Healing Field with Julie Valentine and Tim Fraser, where we opened a powerful conversation about quantum healing, ancient wisdom, galactic awakening, the superconscious, and the multidimensional nature of transformation.
And then the last one will be episode 342, Inclusion and Exclusion Themes, the dream pattern that maps belonging wounds. And this is where we explored how dreams can reveal the places where we felt left out, unseen, or uncertain of our belonging, and how those dream patterns can actually become invitations into deeper healing.
Hmm. So, as you listen today, we invite you to notice what lands in your body, what you might hear, something perhaps that brings clarity, or something that stirs tenderness, or
Mhm.
something that helps you see your own healing journey in a new way.
Yes. And as always, we invite you to listen with compassion, not to fix yourself, not to analyze yourself harshly, but really to become more curious about what your body, your dreams, your creativity, and your inner knowing may be doing its best to show you.
Yes. So, Gloria, let's begin with Sarah's episode. I remember that conversation having such a beautiful bridge between creativity, embodiment, energy, storytelling, and healing.
Yeah, me too. What really stood out to me was how Sarah spoke about creativity, not as something separate from healing, but actually as a part of who we are. She talked about art, storytelling, acting, movement, and expression as all are ways that the life force moves through us.
hmm And she made like such a powerful point that we are all creative beings. Even if someone doesn't identify as an artist, creativity can show up in how we move, how
Yeah.
we speak, how we parent, how we arrange our homes, and how we respond to life.
Yeah. I loved when she talked about her mother as being deeply creative, even though her mother may not have had the title of artist. And that really felt important because, so many people think that creativity has to be official, public, polished, or like productive.
Yeah, right, right. But Sarah really invited us back into the innocence of
Yeah.
creativity. Remembering what we loved as children, what brought us alive before we started judging it, or it was judged for us, or measuring whether it was good enough.
Yeah. And that connects so deeply with the embodiment piece. She was really clear that creativity doesn't just come from the mind. It comes through the whole body, through the breath, through, feelings, emotions, movement, and reconnecting to our inner circuitry.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And one phrase that stayed with me was when she kept saying, take it to the body. If something hurts, if something triggers us, if we feel stuck or disconnected, rather than only trying to figure it out mentally, we can bring curiosity to where it lives in the body.
Yeah, that really aligns with what we talk about here. The
Mhm.
body, it's not an obstacle to healing. It's a part of the healing field. And it carries wisdom and memory, sensation and guidance for us.
hmm And she spoke about emotions in such a refreshing way, not as bad or dangerous, but
Yeah.
as colors, as information and part of the palette of being human.
Yeah, I love that with the colors. When we're disconnected from our emotions, we're often disconnected from our own sense of creativity as well. It's if we've learned to suppress anger or grief, longing, or even joy and desire, then we're also suppressing energy that could become expression, or it could become movement, a song, art. It could become truth or a different choice that we have.
Mm. Oh, that's such a beautiful point, Gloria. And I think Sarah's episode reminded us that creativity is not just about making something outside of us, it's
Yeah.
also about how we create our lives.
Yeah. And that's where the title, You Are the Dreamer, feels really powerful. She talked about being the dream, the dreamer, and the dreamed. And that image invites us to recognize that we're not just passive characters in the story. We're actually participating in the creation of the story.
Yeah, yeah. And yet that doesn't mean forcing or controlling everything. It means it feels more like becoming conscious and becoming aware of the story we're living, the story that we inherited and the story that wants to emerge from a truer place.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what she calls the creatorship, right? It's
Mm.
being in relationship with life and asking, oh, what story am I living? And is this still true for me? Is this the like old protection, old pattern, old conditioning? And what truly is desiring to be expressed right here, right now?
Yeah. And another thing that I really appreciated was how Sarah normalized starting small. If someone's feeling stuck, she didn't
Yeah.
say, "Oh, go create a huge masterpiece." She said, like, maybe move a toe, take a breath, write one word, remember, one thing you loved as a child.
Yes. And that really holds anyone that may have experienced some trauma with care. I like that. Because when our nervous system is overwhelmed, big steps, they feel impossible. But a small movement toward life, like the breath, a, a sound, a moment of self-kindness, it begins to restore flow from within.
Yeah. And when that flow from within is restored, it connects to something else. She said, um, nothing is wrong with you. Even if you are stuck, even if you feel blocked,
Mm,
even if you're in a dark place, there's nothing wrong with you.
I love that phrase. I really do. Because shame often locks the pattern in place. It's like cement. But compassion is like a solvent. It begins to soften it. So when we can say, this is where I am, and I can meet myself here, or I can allow myself to be met here, that's when something begins to move.
Yeah. So perhaps we could look at an invitation. One invitation from Sarah's episode is looking at where has my creative life force become hidden? Muted, silenced, or blocked. And then looking at what is one very, very, very small baby step way I can lovingly invite it back.
Yeah. And another question might be, what did I love before I learned to perform, to please, or to protect?
Oh, that's amazing, Gloria. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, sometimes the path forward begins with, for me, I know for sure, remembering the child self who sang and painted and danced, imagined, simply delighted in being alive.
Yeah. And then when we look at the next episode, that was such a different conversation with Julie and Tim. Um, Yet the theme of curiosity carried through again.
It really did. Both Julie and Tim spoke so much about curiosity as a doorway. Julie described how curiosity had led her from human design and astrology and the matrix, energetics, coaching, alchemy. I mean, goodness, there was quite a list.
Yeah.
The quantum healing and star magic. And then also the breath work. I noticed she did quite a bit of breathing, even in the episode. And
Mm,
that all became that quantum alchemy fusion.
yeah. And Tim used the phrase terminally curious, which is
I
so
like that.
interesting. He
Yeah.
talked about how that curiosity served him in technology and then also served him in his spiritual awakening.
Yeah. And what I found so interesting was the way they brought together structure and mystery.
Mhm.
Julie, especially, she spoke about the alchemy as something that helps us bring context to transformation. So it's not just floating out there in the quantum field. It's, how do we actually embody this? How do we begin to recognize those patterns and those beliefs and behaviors?
Yeah. Yeah, that was important to me too.
Mm.
Because sometimes conversations around quantum healing or multidimensional awareness can feel like so big that people might not know how to ground them.
Yeah, and Julie, she kept bringing it back to embodiment, to coherence, to congruence and authenticity. And also she spoke about right action. She talked about how it's not enough to set an intention, there needs to be an aligned action with the intention.
Yes, yes. That was a very practical place for me. Intention without action can stay
Oh,
abstract, but
definitely.
the right action helps bring the inner knowing into a lived reality.
Yeah. And then Tim, he added another layer when he talked about attention, where our attention goes, right? Our energy flows there. So we
Mhm.
have intention, attention, and action. And that feels like such a helpful triad.
Yes, yeah, it really does. With that intention, what am I choosing?
Hmm.
And then the attention, what am I noticing and feeling with my, awareness? What am I feeding with my awareness?
Yeah.
And then action, how am I embodying that? Like what am I doing to embody that choice in my life?
Yeah. And when Julie, she spoke really beautifully about the unconscious. So there's the unconscious, the subconscious, and the superconscious that she spoke about, and how part of awakening is building a bridge between those layers within the self. And that really felt so connected to the work that we do, Gail, with
Mm,
consciousness and the unconscious patterns.
yeah, yeah, it really does. Yes. And she described authenticity as something much deeper than a buzzword. Not
Yeah.
just I'm being myself as a paraphrase, but a real alignment between inner essence and outer expression.
Yeah, that really stayed with me because, so many people live from the roles they play. The helper, the professional, the parent, the achiever, the peacemaker. I live that one a lot, or the spiritual person. And there's a lot of different roles that we can play, and they may be very meaningful, but they're not the whole truth of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if we've been shaped by family, well, I don't know who hasn't been shaped by family, culture, education, or survival. We might not even realize how much of our life is being lived from an old structure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why Julie's language around coherence and congruence really felt important because it's a movement toward living from the inside out rather than from the outside in.
Mm-hmm. And Tim's story of realizing that he had been intuitively reading the room and channeling insight in his professional work was fascinating.
Yeah.
At the time, he didn't have the language for it, but gradually he began to recognize that he was working with energy and intuition, even in the business setting.
Yeah. Well, I love that. It's a great example, but it's a powerful reminder around how our gifts, they often show up before we even know what to call them, you know? We've perhaps been using our intuition, having our sensitivities, or our energetic awareness for absolute years.
Mm.
But because it didn't fit some kind of a formal category, we didn't even know or recognize it as a gift that we have.
Yeah. And I just want to name that this can be true for listeners too.
Yeah.
Someone might be very good at sensing emotional shifts in a room or knowing when something is off or feeling that somebody isn't saying something or
Mhm.
feeling they feel what they're not saying. And instead of seeing that as wisdom, they may have judged themselves as too sensitive.
Oh, because that's what they were told before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh, you're too sensitive. I've heard that.
And that's part of healing, learning to relate to our sensitivity as part of our intelligence, while also developing our capacity for grounding and having healthy boundaries and discernment.
Yeah. Oh, Gloria, that word discernment feels important here because Julie and Tim spoke about the quantum field and how it guides energy, galactic awareness, and multidimensional healing. And they also kept emphasizing safety. Because I mean that's important to you and I, but safety and thresholds and not pushing people beyond what they can embody.
Well, I really appreciate that. It's the reminder not to be attached to the outcome before it's even here, not having that kind of a projection. Because in deep healing work, the pace, it matters. You know,
Hmm.
we can't force transformation. We need to be responsible for creating safe containers. And we can then invite awareness and we can support the next threshold. That threshold, the person's body, their actual nervous system, and their soul, they all need to be honored. And we need to trust that timing for them, with them.
Yeah. And that connects so strongly to the truth we return to again and again. All healing is relational. It happens in relationship with ourselves and with the body, with who we're working with, or the
Mhm.
guide, the practitioner, with the field, and with the deeper intelligence of life.
Yeah. And, this episode with them invited us into a very expanded view of healing, while also still reminding us that grounding matters, breath
Mhm.
matters, safety matters, and the body matters. And taking that right action really does matter.
Yeah. So, looking at an invitation again here, perhaps the invitation from Julian Tim's episode is, where am I being asked to become more curious about my own multidimensional nature? Also, when I ask this, being staying grounded in my body and my daily choices.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then another question might be, what intention is asking for my attention right now and my right action? Bringing
Right.
that triad in again. I really enjoyed the triad.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, it's good. Just the three A's. Yeah. And then we had episode 342, and that brought us to a tender and personal conversation about
Mm.
dreams of inclusion and exclusion.
Yeah, that episode felt very close to my heart because belonging wounds are so deeply human.
Hmm.
And, many of us know what it feels like to feel left out or unseen, forgotten, or just feeling uncertain of our place in the world.
Yeah. And dreams have such an interesting way of revealing those wounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may show us a family gathering, a school setting, a vacation, a room we can't enter, or a circle we're not invited to.
Yeah. And we talked about in this episode that the dream is not random. So, from a Jungian perspective, dreams speak through symbols and images, archetypes, and emotional patterns, and they reveal what the conscious mind just may not be ready to name directly.
Hmm. Yeah, and something that stood out to me, Gloria, was your dream about the family reunion, the food, the dog needing to be fed in a very specific way,
Right?
the pizza being boxed in just the right containers, and then the women going on vacation without you.
Yeah, really, that dream held so much. But what I appreciated was that it didn't just simply show exclusion. It showed the pattern that was around the exclusion. The way a younger part of me had learned to actually move into the caretaking, into the organizing and managing and just doing my best to make everything right.
Hmm. Felt like an important distinction,
Yeah.
because the wounded wasn't only I'm left out, it was also then, going into, well, maybe if I'm useful enough, careful enough, helpful enough, or good enough, then I can belong.
Yeah. And I, I think so many people can relate to that
Mm.
because many of us learn to earn belonging by being helpful. And then others learned to belong by being quiet or impressive, maybe invisible or agreeable, successful, or just emotional low maintenance. And I want to say that, I don't know, I've noticed lately, more recently, as I pay attention more with intention, I can actually feel inside of myself when that edge is starting to rise up in me when I'm speaking with somebody or when I'm in a certain environment. And it's kind of interesting. It's hard to describe, but there's a felt sense of that aspect, that pattern as it starts to rise up, and I can start to go into a little doubt.
Mm.
It's kind of interesting. So
Yeah, I love that. Pain, like paying attention where my intention. That's you know, really
Yeah.
bringing that through again. And then it seems like the dream really shows the role, like it shows
Mhm.
the caretaker archetype or the outsider or the exiled one.
Yeah, and the outsider archetype is so tender because it carries both pain and wisdom. And it may be the part of us that learned really early, I don't fit, or something about me just isn't welcome here. But the outsider, it also sees what others may not see. So it carries
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And with the exiled part, the part that wonders, why wasn't I chosen? What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I invited?
And the healing is not necessarily to go back and force the circle to include us.
Mhm.
For me, and what I'm recognizing is the healing is to actually turn towards the excluded one within and acknowledge, I see
Mm.
you. Acknowledge you don't have to beg to belong. And then if there's an invitation within, you belong with me and I will not abandon you. So
Yeah.
there's what we've called in the past inner parts conversations, right?
Yeah. I mean that feels so powerful because well, my experience, we weren't taught growing up to belong to ourselves. And it feels so powerful because the dream, and then you've have been discovering this because the dream becomes an invitation into the relationship with the self, deeper and deeper and deeper, it sounds like.
Yeah. And that's why dream work is so relational.
Mm,
We're relating to the symbols and the dream figures, the younger parts or the archetypes, even the body sensations that arise as we sit in that. We're relating with each one of them. Each one of them actually represents an aspect. It's like an inner constellation.
yeah. And I want to bring about the piece about the pizza and the boxes. That sort of stood out as, that every container can that not every container can hold what the soul creates.
Yeah, and I remember in that one, that was a really big one for me in the dream because I was really curious about that. Because in the dream, really cutting the pizza in very distinct shapes and then looking for a box that it would fit. It
Mhm.
was just so fascinating. Sometimes we keep trying to fit our gifts, like our voice, our joy, our truth, into containers that are too small. And a family system may not hold it, or an old identity, it may not hold it, or a relationship may not hold it. A role that once helped us survive, it just may not fit any longer who we are actually becoming.
Yes. What a wonderful connection to individuation. That movement toward becoming more whole, more honest, more aligned with the true self.
Yes, individuation. Get my tongue around that word.
Yeah, I
It
know. That's
often it often asks us to discern the difference between that structural belonging and the soul belonging. Just because we are connected to a system, it doesn't mean that we actually feel nourished
Mm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just because we outgrow a role, it doesn't mean then that we're rejecting others. It may mean that we're learning to actually now trust our own inner truth,
Oh
which is a
gosh,
big one.
that really feels important because it can, feel uncomfortable at the same time to be leaving a group, leaving a
Yeah.
role. Seems so important because to name that discernment is not rejection.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
discernment is an act of truth. And for
Hmm.
many of us, it's a new movement, especially, especially if we were trained to keep the peace, to swallow our needs, or to make ourselves useful in order to be loved.
Yeah. And then circling back to look at deep questions from that episode. And one that comes to mind for me from what you shared and we've been talking about was can I belong and then still be myself?
Yeah. And that question feels very central because false belonging asks us to abandon our true nature in exchange for acceptance.
Mhm.
But true belonging, it allows us to stay connected to our hearts.
Hmm. And Gloria, you shared that when you asked what true belonging felt like in your body. And, for you, you shared that the answer was joy and freedom.
Yeah, there's so much freedom. I love it. Not carefulness, not self erasure, not managing the field. Joy and freedom. I mean, yeah, it's buoyant.
Yeah. And gosh, what a powerful medicine.
Oh, yeah.
More powerful than what we can purchase, that's for sure.
And maybe that's one of the gifts of dreams. They may begin with pain, and yet if we stay with them gently, they can lead us back to life.
Mm. Well, let's look at episode 342 here. And a question that we could look at is looking at what part of me has felt excluded and how can I include that part of myself now?
Yeah, and another question might be, what kind of belonging does my soul need now?
Mm. Yeah. Oh, Gloria. So as we look at these three episodes together, Sarah, Julie, and Tim, and then the conversation we had together, what is the larger thread that you notice?
Mm. The thread that I notice is returning to the body, returning to the creative self, returning to the soul, returning to the parts of us that were exiled, silenced, or forgotten.
Mm, yeah, I see that too. Yeah. Sarah invited us to return to creativity through the body. Julie and Tim invited us to return to our multidimensional nature and our deeper essence. And the dream episode invited us to return to the excluded parts of ourselves with
Mm.
compassion.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. All three episodes, they actually challenge the idea that healing is only about fixing what is broken.
Right. And healing, well, it may be more about remembering what is whole.
Yeah, remembering our creative power, our inner guidance, our connection to something larger,
Hmm.
and remembering the parts of ourselves that we learned to hide in order to belong.
Yeah. And with, that theme of return, each episode brought us back to return to embodiment.
Mm,
Sarah spoke about the breath and the body as the pathway to the creative flow. And Jim and Julie spoke about breath work, coherence, and grounding the quantum into action. And the dream episode asked us to feel what it really feels like when we feel like we truly belong. What does it feel like in the body?
yeah, and that's such an important point because the body is where integration actually happens. We can have beautiful insights, but if they don't become embodied, then they don't truly end up changing the way that we live.
Hmm. Perhaps that's where all three episodes are asking us to slow down, not just to understand something, mentally, but to notice how does this live in me?
Mhm.
Like where do I feel this? And then, what action is aligned now?
Yeah, and I also noticed the thread of creatorship. Sarah named it directly, we are the dreamer. And Julie and Tim, they spoke about intention, attention, and action. And in the dream episode, we looked at choosing belonging rather than trying to earn it.
Mm, yeah, that's quite a powerful movement from unconscious adaptation, trying to figure out how to fit in, to consciously choosing creation.
Yeah. So beginning to recognize that rather than living from the old patterns, such as, oh, I have to perform, I have to be useful, I have to hide, or I have to be accepted by that circle,
Mm.
we might begin to ask, what's true now? What do I choose? Oh, what wants to be created through me?
Yeah, and I really want to emphasize that, well, for us and what we talk about, it doesn't mean bypassing pain.
No, No, we actually include it. We listen to it. We
Mm-hmm.
bring compassion to it, and we allow the wound to become a doorway into deeper truth.
Mm-hmm. And that's the healing you method in action. Healing through relationship with the body, with the soul, with the field, with our dreams, and with one another, and with the parts of ourselves that have been waiting to come home to us.
Yeah, I love that. All healing is relational.
Maybe we can offer listeners a few reflection questions from these three episodes, Gloria.
Well, that'd be fun. Yeah. So if you're listening, you might take these to your journal or into a meditation or simply into a quiet moment of reflection.
Yeah, and let's see, like from Sarah's episode, you might ask, what part of my creative force wants to come back to be with me online?
Yeah. And what did I love as a child before
Mm,
I learned to judge, hide, or perform?
yeah, oh, that's good. Yes. And from Julie and Tim's episode, you might ask, what intention is asking for my attention and right action now?
Yeah. And where am I being invited to trust my inner knowing more deeply while staying grounded in my body?
Hmm. Yeah. And then from the dream episode, you might ask, like what part of me has felt excluded? And how can I include that part of myself now?
Mm. And maybe the deepest question is, what kind of belonging does my soul need now?
Mhm. Ah, those are beautiful questions. And we invite you, our listeners, to move gently with them. You don't have to force an answer.
Yeah. And so sometimes the answer arrives through the body or through a dream, through a conversation, maybe through a song, through a sudden knowing, or maybe through one small next step.
Mhm. Thank you for joining us for this recap conversation. We hope it helped you integrate the deeper wisdom from these last three episodes.
Yes, and we invite you to continue listening for where your own creative power is stirring and where your inner guidance is speaking, and where the parts of you that once felt excluded may be ready to come home.
Wonderful. And in our next episode, we'll be joined by Robert Nadoping for a conversation about purpose, impact, resilience, and what it means to build a life and a mission from what truly matters.
Robert brings a grounded and meaningful message around living your purpose through daily action, making a difference one person at a time, and remembering that your life has more value than you may realize.
Hmm. A title we're holding for that episode is Your Message is Your Medicine: Purpose, Impact, and Living What Matters.
I love that because it speaks to something so important, that our story, our challenges, our healing, and our purpose, they're not separate.
Hmm.
Often what we lived through becomes part of the medicine we bring into the world.
We look forward to sharing that conversation with you next time.
So until then, may you listen gently to your body, trust the wisdom of your dreams, and remember that you do not have to abandon yourself in order to belong.
Thank you so much for being with us on the Healing You Method podcast.
We'll see you next time.